Good morning. Today marks the 50th day since President Trump requested a supplemental for the border. 50th day, 15 times the Democrats have voted no. 15 times they've had an opportunity. There's not anyone in this nation that doesn't understand there's a crisis at the border. The New York Times has not written one editorial, but two editorials. But what work has gone on? They have wasted the precious time of this floor for a facade on appropriation bills that are never going to become law. These bills will not make it to the president's desk. These bills will go nowhere. And to really true and understand the metrics and measure this new Socialist Democratic Party, the so-called majority that wants to be of the people, when you look at the number of amendments they allowed to come to the floor, compare them to the Congress of last. In the last Congress, with the Republicans in the majority, 45% of the amendments were Democrats, where only 38% Republicans. Let me repeat that. The majority party in the last Congress allowed fewer Republican amendments to the floor and gave the minority more. What does this Congress do? This new Socialist Democratic Party that is more concerned about control than they are about freedom. 70% of these amendments that have come to the floor are Democrat. How many does the minority have? 18. That's appalling. That's not a party that brings the floor that has the power of the idea to win. They continue to run this facade because they do not want to address the actual crisis on the border, driven much because of the lack of action by this own Congress. But there is a need. One, to make sure you take care of the children, but provide for those that actually are protecting the border at the same time. I do not believe this is controversial. I believe this could be bipartisan. In the days that the New York Times writes two editorials, everybody in America understands there's a crisis, except one entity, the new Socialist Democrats that have the majority in Congress. It is time to put the politics aside. I'm happy to hear that on the other side of this chamber in the Senate that they are coming to an agreement, unlike the leadership over here. I appreciated our ranking Republican, Kay Granger, and the work she's doing in the Appropriation Committee. But to sit there and provide this work and to see the one-sidedness, the avoidance of crisis is frustrating. Kay Granger was one that actually led a delegation down to the Triangle to look at the challenge that was coming forward. She knows what the border needs at the same time, and she has been advocating for that. We were close to be able to come to an agreement just a couple weeks ago. When that could not come together, we actually have had 15 votes on the floor. It's been very clear. 15 times the Democrats have said no, while everybody else in America says you need to do something. Now, it's very clear to the world when you look at any of the intelligence of what's going on that Iran is provoking the world. That Iran is up to their same way that we've always known. The only thing they know is terrorism. The only thing they know is to try to blackmail the entire world. The one thing they don't understand is the resolve of not only this administration, but this country. That we will stand very firmly in the actions that this President Trump has taken. We applaud him from actually moving aircraft carriers, moving planes, and now moving individuals to make sure Iran does not get their way, to make sure that the world is safer, that actions do not have to be taken, to actually have strength. As we continue the rest of the week, I'm hopeful that this new Socialist Democrat majority will stop wasting our precious time, will stop saying no, and actually solve the crisis problem. With that, open up for questions. Yes, ma'am.
On the southern border, what are your thoughts on the detention facilities being described as or characterized as concentration camps?
I think Congresswoman AOC needs to apologize, not only to the nation, but to the world. She does not understand history. She does not understand what's going on the border at the same time. But there is no comparison, and to actually say that is really embarrassing. What's happening along the border and why we have a crisis, just last month, 144,000 people were apprehended illegally crossing a border. But they're being cared for. They're getting health care treatment and others. But the challenge here is we're on pace to have more than 1 million people come across this border illegally. Think of the size of that. I come from the most populous state in the nation. 12% of the entire nation lives in California. Our capital city is Sacramento. Only 490,000 people live there. But twice the number is coming across. Those are only the individuals who are apprehended. We've had instances, and it's never been this high in the last decade. There is time for action to be taken. And for the idea that for 15 times they would vote against funding to actually care for those individuals who are apprehended is appalling to me. And to take something that happened in history where millions of Jews have died and equate it to somewhere that's happening on the border, she owes this nation an apology.
Yes, ma'am.
Yesterday, Facebook unveiled its new digital currency, Libra. We've seen some pushback on this idea already. What are your thoughts on Libra? What do you think about Facebook handling our money? And what regulations do you think Congress needs to put in place?
I think this is an area that the financial services should look into, and I know the administration has been. My concern with Facebook is going to come to privacy. How much privacy is involved, how much individuals they've taken from and others, and I think this is an area that we should look at. I don't believe if you break up the company that does anything to privacy. So privacy is the number one thing I'd look at in the process. Yes.
Just going back to the border, are you satisfied with the level of transparency from these agencies that are running these facilities? And do you feel that members of Congress are getting the sorts of access to these facilities, without planning a month ahead, and knowing that things can change? Do you think that, I know you've been down there, but do you think that
I think every member of Congress should have to go there. And I would tell you, to the men and women from all the agencies who work along the border, I thank them for their service. They are being pushed beyond what their only job description is. They are being pushed from the ability that, are we going to provide the money to actually let them do their job? At the same time, yes, I see the accountability, but at the time that you just had 144,000 people apprehended, you're at a real peak time. We have to be also cognizant of the ability, can they report as fast as the request of we're having them do their job? I think members should go down to the border, have a clear picture of what's happening. New York Times understood it. New York Times has done 2 editorials on it. Judiciary Committee, I don't know if they're bringing somebody else back from 3 decades ago to be more concerned about impeachment instead of more concerned about what's happening in the nation today. That's a greater concern to me. That the majority party, I don't know how many of them been there. I don't know how many of them ask questions, but I'm sure they'll have another hearing about an impeachment or something else. I think it's time to move on. I think they're missing what the country is asking them to do. Yes, ma'am.
The president threatened these mass deportation raids. I'm just curious, do you think this is a serious and realistic idea given the limited resources?
Well, I think what the president was talking about, the number of people that already have had a court order to actually depart. I think the greatest thing that this body can do is actually solve the immigration problem. I don't know that I've ever seen a hearing in this new majority on immigration and judiciary. I would think that is where we should start. I would think that is where we can find common ground, because much of this is driven by the current problems we have in our immigration system. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are on, or what position you have when it comes to immigration. We know the system is broken, and it is time for us to sit down and solve it. Thank you very much.